Council work session for Monday, July 31, 2017. We will go ahead. We have 4 items. We'll start with item A, amending city code regarding court costs. Before we begin on this, I'm not going to ask for a staff report. I had a conversation with Mr. Zur prior to the meeting. There is, I believe, a request for an opinion from the State Attorney General's office regarding this issue. I'd hate for us to get into any discussions that would be moot or would potentially be in conflict with that. So if there is no objection, I'd like to go ahead and remove this from the docket tonight so we can have this set for the staff to provide us an opinion regarding the Attorney General decision or any other information that would come along further. Seeing no objection, we'll move on to item B, City Endowment Fund. I'll turn it over to Mr. Fearborn.
Thank you, sir. And I'll turn it over to Mr. Icky, and Mr. Zur will have some background information on this. Sir.
Thank you, Mr. Fearborn. So the presentation tonight will be relatively brief and really is a follow-up to a conversation that the council started back in January as part of a joint meeting with the Raymore Arts Commission. At that meeting in January, we had initiated the idea of creating a citywide endowment that would be used for funding of arts projects or cultural amenities throughout the community. One of the things as we've begun researching is we've taken a slightly different path and wanted to kind of provide an update, give some information, but also but realizing we're kind of heading toward the same goal. One of the things that we're looking to do is, rather than a single endowment, would be to create a foundation, or using an existing 501c3 to create a community foundation that would not just be for the arts or for parks, but would be really for the entire city. Any department could participate. There would be many different usages through different programs, and so it would in effect be similar to the idea of the endowment, would allow for community direct investment in projects. It would be able to provide a venue for tax deductible donations and so on. The structure for the endowment would be slightly different. What we would be doing is using the RAYMAC organization, the Raymore Community Assistance, which had been previously used for public infrastructure projects. It is, as we did some research, is a 501c3. We are looking at the possibility of using that RAYMAC structure to change the bylaws and other information or purpose within it to turn it into a 501c3 focused on the arts and cultural amenities. City Council would continue to serve as the board of directors, and staff would also continue to support the new foundation board. The responsibilities, we'd keep them as simple as possible and as pretty much as straightforward as we have in the past. With the City Council serving as the board of directors, setting policy and direction. The finance department would continue to manage the day-to-day finances and the annual reporting, donation letters, the 990 IRS forms, and the communications department would step up its involvement, providing fundraising tools and training for staff. So if we were using this as an arts, parks, cultural foundation, or any other city project, the communications department would be involved in helping those departments as they would want to either individually fundraise or participate in the foundation itself. So really we're just kind of looking for some initial discussion, some thoughts, and any other feedback. Mr. Zur can provide kind of the details as to what would be necessary moving forward.
Mr. Zur.
Thank you. Happy to provide any additional input. From a procedural standpoint, you do have the RAYMAC entity, which is already in existence as a not-for-profit entity in the state of Missouri. There's the potential for being able to slightly alter the articles of incorporation in order to be able to address that. And then we would have to address the 501c3 designation for it as well. But from a conceptual standpoint, this is a viable option for the council to consider and for the city to consider to fund these type of projects. What I would say is at this point we are looking at taking on the Raymore Cemetery at this time, and so there will be some further evaluation after. I think my orders of priorities at this point are cemetery, address the cemetery items first, and then move to addressing the RAYMAC issues and determining whether or not what the final outcome for RAYMAC utilization for this purpose is. but viability at this time appears appropriate.
A couple of the items historically that make this, to staff at least, a recommended course of action for the council. Originally, what we had been looking at is a single endowment. Running a single endowment would mean we would have to go through, obviously, all of the items associated with a single endowment, real similar to what we would have to do with the RAMAC organization anyway. And what you see with a lot of single endowments is they get bundled into so that there's not the administrative oversight associated with it. You see them placed with outside organizations. The council not having full control over it in that there's somebody else controlling it for the only reason of possibly garnering in a low interest rate environment a better investment option just doesn't seem attractive enough for us to have the council lose control of the funds that are coming in for city purposes. The second item, frankly, is ultimately staff likes the idea that even with a targeted donation coming in for a specific purpose, the council is ultimately the thumbs up, thumbs down on the expenditure of those funds when the time comes. It would, let's say that funds are being donated for XYZ project, and when it gets to a certain threshold, the council then those funds should be expended by virtue of the fact that they're being donated. Let's say that it was for any capital project that might be going. Ultimately, I think the council would want the same safeguards that are in place relative to bidding, relative to seeking RFPs that are in place for everything else because it's for the city. So it would ultimately give you all that oversight and staff needing to follow that same sort of a format, which we think is in place for very good reasons as far as controls and audits are concerned. For that reason, staff would recommend this particular route be adopted by the council. Ultimately, it would not be the council coming together, but there would be a series of bylaws changes that would have to be in place for RAMAC, and so ultimately it would be the board of directors for RAMAC coming together to change your name and change your bylaws to make this what is considered a charitable organization that can be put into place for purposes of relieving the city of these sorts of burdens. Fair enough?
Fair enough. Lessening the burdens of government is one of the options available for the charitable organizations. You also have the ability to do public art projects and things like that that are specifically referenced in the 501c3 designation. We want to make sure to be able to expand the articles in order to make sure and cover those items as well as the 501c3 designation so as not to run afoul of any of that.
Any questions of staff, Mr. Townsend?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. Quick question on the RAMAC as it organized today. From our understanding, that was purposed for infrastructure?
That is correct, sir. At a point in time when the city was not large enough to seek additional bonding, you'll note in your budget each year, in the debt service portion of your budget, depending on the assessed valuation of the city, you can only take out, you only have so much bonding capacity available to you, either generally or in special projects, which are considered streets, sidewalks. At the time, we had reached our limit of bonding capacity, so RAMAC was formed as an outside organization, which is legal, to fund parks, infrastructure projects, and stormwater infrastructure projects, and there is still a sales tax in place to both make those debt service payments as well as it was the fund that was used, those two funds were used as the outlet for placing the project proceed money into those funds to ultimately make those purchases of infrastructure. Then what happens is RAMAC leases those infrastructure projects to the city. And the lease payment on the part of the city is making the debt service payments, which I believe come off, it's actually been refunded. Cindy, do you remember when that comes off now? Is it 19 for the bond, for the debt service payments? Okay, so RAMAC, that's right, that's why we made the recommendation. They came off last year. So RAMAC, you may remember from Ms. Watson's presentation in April, we recommended that just for this sort of a reason, the RAMAC Board of Directors continue to exist and meet for your annual requirement. And this appears to be a very good reason for that. I mean, it's an ideal structure to proceed with that group.
So just as I was reading through and hearing your earlier discussion on some of the things that popped out at me with regard to an endowment, and then some of the terminology in our presentation tonight with regard to departments, specific departments and citywide organizations, I understand with regard to Parks and Rec and some cultural things, and a citizen, one entity wanted to donate, do a donor sponsor a donation specific to a park or a art feature and want to restrict their funds to that, but we have the latitude as the board to deviate from their restricted donation?
No. Yeah, if they give it with a covenant assigned to it,
okay,
you are required to spend it on that.
Bylaws will address that.
But we didn't want to limit the council and ultimately the board of directors thinking, or donors thinking, to, well, it's just to accept a piece of artwork, or it's just to accept $100 to go towards a new statue in Rec Park. Maybe a group would get together and say, we would like to establish a portion of funding and make donations to a drug dog, medium beautification.
This is not, I want to give an extra as a development, a community, an extra $1,000 to make sure my street gets plowed to Public Works.
No.
Okay.
The board would also have the ability to determine what to accept as part of donations or grants or gifts that they would be providing anyway too. So ultimately, the board has the ability to determine the gifts that they receive.
Okay.
Councilmember Kello?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. So the board, if they didn't didn't want to take on or didn't like a idea for a donation, they wouldn't have to? That's what, okay. Follow-up question to that is, we're talking about parks and art features and stuff like that tonight, but I can imagine this being a wider topic. Would there be latitude for the people who donate to say that this is going for a certain things, certain projects, certain function? Would it allow for things that aren't thought of tonight or just that we assume tonight would be? I'll throw out an example. If somebody wanted to donate for a Oats bus for a year or 2 years, would they be able to do that and then that be supported?
I will tentatively answer with yes. It depends upon the language that we incorporate and how broad we make that under the terms of the Articles of Incorporation as well as the 501c3 designation. There's a list of multiple items that an entity can be created for charitable purposes, and as long as we fall within that list, we can draft it in order to comply with the charitable benefits. That can be relatively broad. Initially, it was presented for purposes of art projects, but it'll really depend upon the language that we incorporate for what the purpose purposes of the entity are created for. So yes, it could potentially be broad like that to encompass that.
Okay, that explains it, because I can see this being a good thing for many different things, and I'm only using that as an example because that's all I can come up with. But, you know, I don't want to get stuck in the rut that it's only for hard, tangible things. I mean, there's so much more that charitable money can go for, and I was just wondering if the door was open for that.
We absolutely thought that it would be, the reason we broadened the language from arts and cultural was for that very reason, sir, to include a myriad of city services. Where we would limit it and where we would recommend that it be limited is where, to use your example, sir, the concern of, let's say that all of the residents on Creekmore Drive, as an example, wanted to get together and donate $500 to it to pay for the overtime that would be associated with providing additional services for snow plowing. We would strongly recommend that areas where we were creating a disparaged service would not be considered by the board.
Councilmember Barber.
Thank you. And just so I'm clear, the board of directors would make a determination whether they accept a project, or my concern would be somebody has a piece of property they want to donate, and it's found out that that property is a liability, a major liability. They could not force us to take that.
Absolutely correct.
Okay. Oh, and then one more. What if somebody says, okay, I want, on all city buildings, I want bike racks, bicycle racks, and I'm going to start that, and here's $100. And we know it's going to take $3,000, $4,000 to do that. 10 years from now, or 5 years from now, there's $200 earmarked for bike racks. How is that handled? How do you take that? I mean, obviously it's earmarked for a project. Doesn't look like that project is going to happen. What's the steps in taking care of that?
The notion is you could hold those funds for as long as you deem appropriate. If you don't feel that it's appropriate, or that's not going to be that you're not going to be able to get a result from that, there are options available to be able to alter the use as long as it complies with the general intent of the donor for it, or you could simply refund those monies if you're inclined to do so.
We can also informationally, when time is going, we can say the following endowments have been set aside, restricted endowments are set aside in the fund, and we advertise those informationally. You know, if you're interested in giving, here's who to contact, that sort of thing.
Councilmember Holman.
Yeah, it's kind of a dovetail off Councilmember Barber's question. Can we commingle funds? Example he gave, somebody's given us, we've gotten $500 over the last 3 years to do the bike racks. We would have to kick in, say, $5,500 of ours, and the council agreed that was a good idea. Is that acceptable? Can we use their funds and our funds to purchase a project?
I absolutely think that budget time, hey, how much is in for the bicycle racks? Let's use some fund balance to purchase the rest of them.
So that's
out of city funds. I definitely think that we wouldn't. I'm always real careful about the word commingle. It scares me. We would be funding so much, and the fund would be funding so much.
Like a public-private partnership. Yes. Councilmember Douglas.
Thank you. And I wondered about that too, because one of my thoughts was who gets to decide on what fundraising campaigns we do. I assume that's the board, but on the other hand, if we have someone who comes up with $50 in their hand with some harebrained idea, do we sit on that $50 in their harebrained idea for years and years? Who would say, well, okay, yeah, we're going to take that on as a campaign, or maybe you better keep your $50 unless you are more willing to put it to one of these options that we have? Are we going to end up with 500 different projects with $50 in the bank for each one?
Well, again, you all can refuse the money. If you don't deem it to be, if you think it's harebrained, yeah, you could say absolutely not, or you could put something on it that you can put a deadline on it.
Okay. So, but not every donation we get would have to come before the board for acceptance? Or would it? If it's a donation maybe for one of our campaigns, we wouldn't have to formally accept every donation? How would
Mr.
that
Zer-
work then?
Mr. Zer, I think we're almost kind of getting into gifting, contracting, mutuality of assent, so.
Ultimately, the answer is the board would be able to determine what gifts it wanted to receive. How actively involved it was in that process is yet to be seen. What I would think is you would want to give direction with regard to those types of gifts for staff's consideration and how they were going to be applied for ultimate reporting back to the board.
Ultimately, what staff would be recommending on this is a generalized outline of what would be accepted and not accepted, so that perhaps not every gift comes before you for acceptance. Although I have to tell you, administratively, that's not that big a deal. I mean, it would mean the RAMAC board, it meets once a month at the end of one of your meetings for 5 minutes, and you look down the list. If there is a reason to meet, you look down the list and say yes, yes, no, 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 and you just vote on them all.
Yes, go ahead.
Right, exactly. Just one other additional comment. When we go to kind of define what the foundation is going to be, and we've kind of addressed it, I just want to throw my 2 cents in as well. I want to be sure, I hope that we can be sure that the definition is broad enough that it will cover all the areas of the city that people are interested in donating to. When Mr. Hickey was making his presentation with arts, parks, and cultural, I know PD has lots of people who would love to make donations, and there's not really an avenue for that. As a PD wife, we kind of looked into possibilities for that, but didn't really get enough people on board with enough time to take it on at the time. And so I would love to see something in there that could help take care of that for people who are wanting to donate there.
And I'm sorry, sir.
No.
Ultimately, when the genesis of this was the Arts Commission looking for an outlet, but you'll notice it's kind of a tagline on all of the deals. There's a comma, and I actually went in and added and had Mr. Hickey go in and add and other city projects, because it would absolutely be staff's intention to bring to the board of directors a very wide perspective on that, where literally anything could at least be looked at by the board of directors, and somebody could say something in there. In fact, I think to somebody who I was talking to, I actually used that example. Animal control is another example. We actually have a fund line for animal control donations, where if it was here, I think we'd get a little bit better response. So, yeah.
Okay. Councilmember Keller?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. And he just answered my question right there, because that's what came up to my mind when Sonia said about the police department, animal control. So that's exactly where I was talking when I'm talking about a wide variety of things that could be supported that city staff or us as the city council in our budget process don't support. So I appreciate that answer, and I think it's great.
Councilmember Berenson?
Thank you. The risk of being off on a tangent here and creating a accounting nightmare, would the city staff consider, or maybe give us some feedback on, Councilman Abdelgawad mentioned avenues to give, a possibility of the citizens maybe donating with their water bill, either rounding up to the nearest dollar, nearest $5, nearest $10, or putting a $1 or $5 gift in there. A completely voluntary thing, of course. Or would that be an accounting issue?
We need to look into the legality of it first.
Okay.
There is the ability in place now to round up your water bill. It doesn't go over real well, but you can round up your water bill, not here. Cities have put this in place to fund for folks who can't make the payment, to fund for insurance for somebody whose water line breaks, and 90% of the citizenry don't realize that if a water line breaks between the meter and their home, they're responsible for that usually $4,000 bill. And so it goes into kind of an insurance fund to do that. Those are met with mixed signals when you do water bill roundup, but we can definitely look at, and so what I would want to get to is, can you designate on the water bill one or the other? And also, there's a component of this that is that we're going to have to look into, that could fall into as well, which is there going to be an ability to just donate? In other words, I want to give money to the city, and I'm going to trust the board of directors on the direction for that money. We need to check into that as well. It's one of the things we're going to look into.
Appreciate it. Mr. Fearborn, if I can step in, is it the method of solicitation of the money that's the legal concern? Is that what the problem is? Or, and then next question is, because it's a 501c3, is it tax deductible?
I'm looking at me, if I can. Sure. I would be looking at it for the separation between the two entities. Mr. Fearborn gave a great example for applying a water bill to pay some other water issue that you'd have going along with it. You're talking about the city sending out its water bill statements and potentially collecting for an unaffiliated, a separate entity under its 501c3 designation. I just want to make sure that we look at that before jumping into it and seeing where the city is crossing between acting on its municipal level and acting for or the benefit of a 501c3 separately.
And my hesitation was because the question hit me cold, and I don't want to give an inaccurate answer to the council on that one, even suggesting something. So, but it's a great question.
I'll also add paragraph 4 of our memo, the language used here, benefiting the arts, parks, and other cultural aspects of our community, and targeted capital or service projects, is wonderfully broad to kind of ensnare things. The nonprofits I've been a part of, you use nice generalized language like that. It's almost to the extent of, we form a corporation, quote, to conduct all lawful business as allowed by the laws of the state, which is, again, pretty much everything. The problem in application with this is looking at the qualifiers that donors put on to determine whether we want to accept. So either they put a condition on it that violates public policy, art that is obscene, a donation that only applies to people of certain age, color, or something discriminatory, or you get into a situation of, I want to donate money that can only be used for events when there are solar eclipses, which almost never occur, and then the city or the nonprofit ends up becoming a bank in perpetuity kind of thing, which that's not what we're here to do. We want the money to serve the community, arts, parks, cultural aspects, et cetera. I've seen these work, so I'm in great support of it. Any other questions of staff? Mr. Holman.
Just to kind of dovetail off Councilmember Abdelgawad's comment, we would have control of, somebody wants to come in and give $100 for a David Duke statue. No, thank you, sir. But we would also have separate control of, just because we got $200 for a project doesn't mean we have to go do a campaign. We don't have to invest Iki's time. I mean, we can be selective in what we do with that. I mean, there's certain things, obviously, people are in love with the Chet Redmond sculptures, and somebody wants, the Arts Commission is pushing for a third one. They've got donations, and we're getting close. That one's worthy because people are excited, and it goes right along with what we've written. But we can pick and choose on those even from a separate standpoint yet beyond whether or not we accept the project. Is that a correct assessment?
The board would be able to make the determinations with regard to the use of funds and the collection of the same.
We, the board. I'm sorry. Thank you.
That's right. Councilmember Abdelgawad.
And just to clarify on that, and so we could decide to campaign for a project that we don't already have money for. So we can decide up front, we want to campaign for this project, or we can receive a suggestion from someone with money behind it and say, yeah, we'll hold on to your money in case anyone else is interested or not.
Right on. Well, we've had a lot of good questions. I'm kind of looking for nods. Do we go ahead and move forward with staff recommendation? Okay.
I'm in support, sir.
Okay. Looks pretty good. There you go, Mr. Fearborn.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. If nothing else on item B, we'll go ahead and move to item C, council participation with the farmers market. Mr. Fearborn.
Thanks, sir. At the Ward 4 meeting last week and actually last month, and I think maybe even once before, Councilmember Abdelgawad brought up the concept that at the farmers market is an ideal location for the council to have a table or a spot there that that would allow for kind of a mini town meeting, but you'd also be able to meet everybody else who was out there. Staff could be providing you all with an informational sheet for that particular week. So what we kind of thought what I wanted to do was bring to the council to see if you would be in support of and want to participate in as a council doing that. And I thought that maybe we could, as a pilot, do the month of September. And because there are award meetings on Tuesday night when that occurs, maybe reversing the weeks that you all would man the table. So week 1 of September, Ward 4 could man the table. And I've checked with Nate, and he's got a thought on a great spot for it. But week 1 would be Ward 4, week 2 would be Ward 3, so it's reversed out, so we could still, on your normal ward meeting night with me, those would still be available. But on one of the other Tuesday nights, each of the wards could have could man the city council table, if you will, that's out there. So just wanted to bring that to you all and see if you'd like to do that in September.
I'm assuming right by the good food truck, the barbecue food truck?
I really can't answer
Okay,
that, sir.
fair enough. Questions of staff? There you go.
You have to crochet something to bring.
There you go. There you go. Councilmember Kellogg, to you.
Would this only be during the month of September?
But for this year, we thought we'd do that. It'd give you, because it's now, tomorrow begins August, it was a little bit of short notice, and tomorrow's Tuesday night. So we thought, okay, well, let's pilot it and see how it goes over for 1 month this year. And then, of course, the next month, the farmer's market's over. So kind of thought we could get it in place, see how it goes, and maybe next year, if you all like it, and it seems to be well received, we could just repeat the process in each month of the farmer's market.
Do you have a follow-up, sir?
Yeah. The only thing that I would be concerned about is that we not politicize it, and I know that the farmer's market's only between certain amounts between this month and this month, but when we start getting close to the November election or something like that, I don't think that it would be wise for us to politicize this in any way, because this is it sounds like this to me is a meet and greet, or not so much a meet and greet, but an informational between council members and constituents, not so much politics of any broader subject other than, us having that opportunity to have contact with not just our constituents, but everybody that's there.
I think it was presented as, and the conceptualization of it is, that it's a mini town hall. It's the chance for you all to be out there as the council and see everybody.
Councilman Berenson?
I think the farmer's market ends in October 1st. So the beginning of October, so they wouldn't have much of an opportunity to campaign if they wanted to. And while I have the mic, I think it's a great idea. I was there when she suggested it. Just my 2 cents. I think it'd be a great way. There's a lot of projects that are happening right now. It'd be a great way for us to control the information that's out there, maybe correct some things that have been on Facebook, and just to give some very straight answers to the public.
Councilmember Dugawan?
That's absolutely what I was thinking, to be able to share information about what's going on in the city, like, maybe a display board that shows the plans for the activity center at Rec Park and some information, that says, hey, have you heard about Centerview yet? Or, information on how we're spending the bond money, what projects we've started, what projects we're still working on, what's coming next, just to inform people about what's happening in the city, kind of the hot topics, as well as just to give people the opportunity to see our faces. People are more likely to come to us with problems, concerns, suggestions when they see us as a person versus an email address or somebody on the television or on the video on YouTube, so just to help us kind of become people and someone they can talk to people in the city.
Mr. Townsend?
I appreciate, Sonia, bringing this idea up, because I do think it's an excellent opportunity to get out once again in front of the citizens. As a community of all ages, not everyone is technologically savvy to get on the internet. They're more tactile, going to the farmer's market. I may run into some people, we all may run into those individuals in the grocery stores or out doing our own normal business, but this is an opportunity to focus on with some key materials for what's going on in the city, to re-engage and let them know what's going on, what's being prepared, get their concerns, bring them back before the council to, as we do our developing budgets and plans for the city, we can hear directly from them. So I think it's an excellent opportunity.
Mr. Barber?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. I think I would treat it just like if you ran into somebody at a grocery store and they had a question for you, except, you're not moving. You're sitting right there, so they could come to you and ask a question. You can answer it. One of the questions I had is just the logistics. Farmers market starts at 4:30. It ends at 6. Is it 4 to 6 or
7?
7? Okay. So, I think between the two of us, I think we could, make, in our ward at least, make it. But I think it's a good idea. Thanks.
I think it's a great idea, too. I agree with everybody's statements. My issue is I don't get off until 4. It's a 30-minute drive under good conditions getting back, and then I change out of uniform. So if I can do like they do on the Minsky's commercial with Graham Zusi and say, hey, you can cover my shift, I'm great. That might be my only issue. I think Kevin will probably handle it for me till I can get there. And then there's sometimes when you're not an hourly employee, your salary, they have a tendency to say, you're going to stay over until this is done. But yeah, just as a personal issue with me, just being able to get there sometimes might be a little bit of a problem, but I think it's a great idea. So, and I'd love to participate if I can.
Yeah. When I saw this on the agenda, it was so organically made sense. I was like, why didn't we think about this before? It's just, to me, it was just a quick yes. And as far as, everybody's work schedules, my thought is, I'm happy I want to respect everybody having their time there, but if somebody couldn't make it, I know between the 8 of us, somebody could volunteer or step in and, again, I agree with a lot of the comments. People love to see us and talk to us and kind of touch us and get that one-on-one. Well, just metaphorically speaking, but, just be able to get that one-on-one connection and standpoint, and to be able to, so, and I guess in some instances, throw things at us, touch us, whatever, but tomatoes, exactly. But no, I think it's a great idea. So I'm not sure we need to belabor this one. The in favors were so strong. I think staff's got their direction on that.
We will begin then with Ward 4. On the first Tuesday of September, we will have the table and dunk tank set up side by side. So
there we go. Last item on the agenda is other. I'll break this up into 2 things. Staff first.
Thank you, sir. Wanted to bring up the work session schedule going forward. Next week, obviously, is the first week of the month. On the 7th, we have an incredibly full agenda. We have the ETC survey revisit. We have the strategic plan being presented to you all, and we have 3 housing or UDC code issues that we'd like to talk to you all about as far as possible amendments to those codes are concerned. So it will be a very, very full agenda next Monday night. The work session following the 7th is the 21st of August. That is the budget work session for the City Council. And that will be the only item that is on. Again, another full session. September, the one following that, the date is September 4th, which is Labor Day. Staff is seeing looming the potential for the need for a presentation to the council. We would not ask you to meet on Labor Day, but if you would be available and willing on the Tuesday night, September 4th, for a possible or the 5th rather, would council be amenable to coming together that evening? Mr. Carteret, the only item for planning and zoning for the month of September is actually the CIP presentation.
Okay, but if you're going to do Tuesday, September 5th, they're going to be at the farmer's market.
If you finished at 7.
Oh, that's true. You could come over right after that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Our problem is we have a developer who has a deadline of the end of September relative to a potential development here in the city. And so we could put it to the second work session of September, but it might push them past a funding deadline that they are needing. And we're not sure that that's going to manifest itself yet, but if it does, I would want to be able to immediately respond to them with a yes, no, because if they are saying they are moving forward and they can't meet till the 21st, they are indicating, and we've double-checked this, they would not have the ability to achieve funding.
Yes, Councilmember Dagwan.
So could we meet at 7:30 that night instead of 7?
If that's what the council would wish to do, that's not a problem. And again, we're not sure if the developer is going to progress to the extent that is the case, but they may very well be there.
Anything else from staff?
That's it. Thank you, sir.
Anything from the council? Mr. Holman?
You said a long agenda on the 21st, is that right?
Next week.
Yeah, okay, so that's Eclipse Day. That's my birthday, so I'm going to be wiped out. So I'm going to, birthday cake, something. You guys will just, ice cream, I like ice cream, so just, if you take care of me, I'm good for that dueling session into the night. That's it.
Huh, a birthday during a meeting. Anything else? Anything else from staff? Or not from staff, but from the council? Seeing nothing, we are done. We're adjourned.